Thank you all for tuning in to the Innovators Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Seth Narayanan, founder and CEO of Telian Systems. Today, we are joined by Nick Yaitsky, who is a healthcare technology innovator and thought leader working at the intersection of clinical workflows, AI, and digital transformation for companies such as Wellstar and ShareCare. He has shared his insights through podcasts and webinars with organizations including KSU, Optum, and the HIMSS Health Advisory Board. Nick's current work focuses on applying agentic AI to improve efficiency and reduce friction for clinicians, particularly hospitalists. He's also active in the innovation community, supporting hackathons and mentoring the next generation of healthcare technologists. Nick, welcome to the Innovators Playbook podcast.
Thank you so much, Seth. I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah, wonderful. I want to know a little bit more about your background. I'm sure the audience wants to know how you grew up, what your early interests were, and kind of any formative experiences that nudged you towards technology and also healthcare.
Thanks so much. When I was a kid, I didn't actually have access to technology, didn't have access to computers. I grew up in the USSR, and it wasn't until I came to the States that I actually got a chance to play with a computer.
Well,
And once I touched the machine, I was hooked. That was kind of the formation itself of this is where I want to be, this is what I want to do, working with technology, working with technical solutions, and really driving innovation in that space has really been the crux of what I've wanted to do. Mm.
yeah.
And so for the longest time, that was just the intent. And so ended up going to Georgia Tech, did my bachelor's work, my master's work over there, really got engrossed in the AI space, the ML space, you name it.
So, when did you get into healthcare? And did you do your graduation in biomed, if I'm not mistaken?
It's funny, I had never planned to go into healthcare. I'm the son of physicians. My mother was a pediatrician, my father was a cardiologist, my grandfather was a pediatrician, so healthcare has always been all around me, and I have never wanted to be a physician. Just it never even crossed my mind, yet somehow or other, I landed into an environment where I was working with healthcare tangential things, health and wellness, life sciences, disease management, lifestyle management. And that evolved into eventually working at Wellstar, where I was working with physicians. Every single day was a conversation with either a nurse or a physician. And it's just been such a fantastic environment to be in, such a fantastic space to really not just disrupt, but just innovate in and really experience what the capabilities really offer.
Yeah. No, Wellstar is such a big name and they've grown so much lately. But I think before Wellstar, you were with ShareCare, right? So that's
Right.
a big local success story in healthcare. So was that your kind of formative pivot into mainstream healthcare? Okay.
Yeah, that's the life sciences work that we did. We started off with doing things with Q&A for healthcare. How do you
Mhm.
answer questions? How do you get the right information? Really building up the information that patients ask on a day-to-day basis. What's the right way to talk to your doctor? And then it evolved into digital therapeutics. How do
Yeah.
you use digital technology, digital apps to deliver preventative flows to reduce your need to go to the ER or to help reduce the prevalence of diseases? How do you stabilize your conditions so you're diagnosed with something and you want to make sure it doesn't get worse? So, how can you use
Mhm.
technology to do that without having to go see a physician?
So again, talking about combining healthcare and technology, I think if I remember right, back in 2011 through 2015, that's when the electronic health record was sort of mandated, right? So companies or providers were initially given some incentives to implement electronic health records, but then towards the end of that 4 or 5 year period, they were penalized if they were not. So that really accelerated, I think, EHR adoption in general and technology adoption in general. So, were you kind of one of those that saw that sort of fusion of technology coming into healthcare at that time and help you sort of leapfrog that change that was happening in the healthcare space with technology?
So during that time, as you mentioned, the EHR adoption was starting to really ferment itself. But the other thing that was also going around was meaningful use.
Right.
And that mentality of how do you communicate with your patients? How do hospitals, how do clinics, how do physicians, how do nurses contact patients? How do you work with them? How do you engage them in a way that reduces readmission, reduces the need for them to come back to the facility? That's really the space that I started to really dig deeper into. When I was a share care, that was one of the things that we did focus very heavily on. How do you support meaningful use for some of these institutions? Because fundamentally, if you think about it, what does a hospital do? Well, a patient has a problem, they go to the ER, they maybe get admitted, but it's for a specific problem that needs to be solved right here and now, right? It needs to be situational. It's very much right now, I've got this problem. Once you leave the hospital, nobody knows you.
Mm.
You're off the radar, right? Nobody knows who you are or what you're doing. That level of communication is missing. It's gone as soon as you leave the four walls of the physical facility. And so that was the big focal point of how do you continue that communication with the patient after they have left to make sure
Right.
they don't come back.
So the whole thing was sort of fragmented and episodic, right? So I'm guessing chronic health records help that in some ways, although still the whole interoperability thing, because you go to one hospital, they're using Epic, and maybe you go to another, they're using Cerner. Even within Epic or within Cerner, there are so many versions and every instance is different, so there is no continuity. How do you continue to sort of provide care to a patient across episodes? And so is that an area of innovation that is still needing to happen?
Absolutely. The EHR, the electronic health record, the patient record itself, it's not innovative. There's no real innovation in that context. We used to have paper patient records, now they're digitized. That's not innovation. That's table stakes. That's foundational. That's like saying, I now have email. Okay, now I can actually start something, right? I now have a website. I now have internet. I now can start to innovate. That's really your building block to get to that point. The innovation comes when you start to make use of that data for the betterment of the patient, to help them improve their health, to help them improve their day-to-day lifestyle, to collaborate and coordinate with them. Whether they went to one facility or multiple facilities, whether their health record is split amongst multiple doctors or one doctor. Once the data is available, that's when you can start.
So how do you define what is actually innovation? Because there is a lot of noise and buzz about things. And then there is the pushback from the medical community saying they're already so fragmented. There is some reluctance to adopt new technologies, even though it might be something innovative. So, what is true innovation and what is a solution looking for a problem?
Yeah, I think that last statement you said is the absolute key here. Innovation is not about new technology for the purpose of technology. It's not about just simply that shiny thing that's out there that everyone is trying to grasp and saying, hey, if only we had technology, we would rule the world. That's not it. Innovation is fundamentally is something that solves a problem.
Yeah.
But you have to start with a problem. You have to realize that there's a problem. You have to realize that there is opportunity for something to be better than what it is. And technology may be a solution, but it's typically not the entire solution, typically not even the driving factor behind that solution. Oftentimes, especially in healthcare, it's the people, the workflows, that age-old term of people process technology, that order, right? You have the people itself, you understand the workflow, you understand the use case, you understand the problem space, you understand the human factor, improve the human factor, and maybe technology helps enable it.
You've been active in AI and specifically in agentic AI. So, I know that's kind of near and dear to your heart, and you're very actively involved in that. How do you explain agentic AI to clinicians? Obviously, they've heard about it, but what kinds of problems and workflows can it solve for clinicians, especially, and then people in healthcare in general?
Well, first of all, what is AI in general, right? Agentic is not a unique thing of AI, right? In the tech space itself, outside of healthcare and the sort, in the tech space, we've been building artificially intelligent systems for decades. These are not new things. These are not things that are popped up out of the blue and suddenly it's there.
It's an evolution of what was algorithms and robotic process automation and other automation things. And yes, LLMs are somewhat of a leap, but in that sense, is agentic AI a leap, or is it a natural progression of where things were leading? I think you're leaning towards the latter, right?
So it's not a clear answer, right? Agentic AI in today's definition is a pretty large step forward in the way that we've been using some of these algorithms and some of these concepts. It is a leap in that sense. But when we talk about the use of it and when we talk about the business space, how do you apply those concepts? I tell people to think of it as another layer of automation. Now, I think you and I both understand that it's not exactly automation. There's a lot more to it than just that.
Yeah.
But conceptually, you can think of it as another type of automation. You alluded to this yourself. RPA, robotic process automation, or background scripting, or screen scraping. We've
Yeah.
been doing these things for so long, right? Now we're really automating those steps in a different way. We're creating these ecosystems or these tools that are able to break down problems in a different way and act in a different way.
I was just thinking about it as you were talking. I guess one of the reasons it's gotten so much traction, the way the answer is presented back to you, right? So it is well formatted, came back to you with a structured answer, like bullet points and formatting and talking in language that you would expect a person to respond. So that's what I think everybody woke up and said, wow, okay, this is almost like it's thinking for me, right?
And it's not just the response that's more human readable, it's the request as well, right?
Yeah,
It's being able
exactly.
to say what you want in
Right.
human terms, not in JavaScript. Being
Correct.
able to actually speak essentially, whether typed or spoken, whatever it might be, but to speak to the request to say, I want this, 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 and this. I want it to do this, and I want it to come back in this way. And it's human in, human out, right?
Yeah.
But it's automating a process. It's automating a workflow. It's automating your request to your response, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I say think of it as automation, but with human language, human process and protocols that is far more accessible. Now everyone can create these automations. You don't have to be an engineer to create these workflows to really use a lot of these tools. Can you do more advanced things if you are an engineer because you have some insights into certain things? Sure. But you could also do more advanced things if you're a domain knowledge expert in that space. If you're doing something clinically pertinent, you're going to have a lot of insight behind the scenes that you can really apply to your workflows and really get deeper into these things. But I think the big thing that is different, the thing that when we're talking to clinicians about agentic systems, is the element of non-determinism, the aspect of when you make a question and you make a request, you won't always get the same answer every time, right?
Yeah.
And how accepting are you of that? Now you're going to get the wrong answer or you're going to get the right answer. That's a different question. But the fact that you simply won't always get the same answer causes a lot of friction, causes a lot of apprehension, right? I asked you this twice and you told me two different things. There's that element of it. And it becomes tricky. It becomes a problem. The thing that I do like to stress to people is oftentimes the kind of problems that you're trying to solve in a system or one of these kinds of tools could solve that problem, but you might not need that to solve the problem. You might need something that's actually a lot more deterministic.
Yeah.
You might need something that is 100% reproducible every time. And that's okay. You don't have to jump on the agentic bandwagon and say everything has to be agentic or nothing at all, right? There's uses for it. There's uses for other things. Don't feel like you're pressured into only going this direction. That's your only option in the world.
So that brings up the question of trust and safety, right? As you pointed out, I think if you ask the same question twice from machines, as humans, we expect, consistency, right? Because a person could respond differently, right? I mean, if I ask somebody how you feel and they say great, and 10 minutes later they can say not great. Whereas with a machine, we are conditioned to expect. You expect it to behave a certain way, and that gives you confidence, right? Whereas, like you said, if the response is not consistent and if it changes, does it make you lose trust in the tool? Plus, other aspects of trust and data security. When I'm describing a problem to an agentic AI tool, let's say there is a agentic nurse practitioner that somebody makes available to me, how confidential is my information going to be, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, what are some of the trade-offs there that you see?
Yeah, so I think that's really the crux of it, that for the longest time we've been building technology, we've been building applications, software that is giving you that same answer every single time, 100%. And the moment that it's not 100%, we immediately say stop, but it's almost never 100%. And you have to ask yourself the question, is that okay? The reality is that in the vast majority of situations, that is okay. Because the reality also is the human aspect of it, that when you're dealing with humans and you're working with humans, you ask questions of humans, they're not going to be 100% right.
Yeah.
Right? Humans are not 100% right. Humans will have some amount of error. And in all reality, if a human is 70% right, usually consider that pretty good.
Hmm.
And yet, the moment that a machine is only 99% right, we consider that bad.
It's like
So,
you wonder what happened in that 1%. Is there more issues there that's going to come up later?
but that's the key to the trust question is exactly that.
Hmm.
When it's not 100%, are you willing to accept it? Are you willing to understand it? Are you willing to use it? The solution really is your general workflow around these tools and the human aspect of what you're doing within these things. Specifically in the healthcare sector, the big thing that I had to immediately come to terms with the moment that I started working with physicians on a day-to-day basis is don't try to tell a doctor what to do. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever tried.
No, they're pretty opinionated. Yeah.
Right? Doctors, by their nature, are very intelligent individuals. You
Yeah.
have to be, in order to make it through med school, to make it the residency, to actually be a physician, you have to be intelligent, pure and simple. And as a result, you have an ownership of what you do. You're very protective of your patients. You're very much, you know what you're doing. You are trying out new things sometimes, but you are very purposeful for what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And when someone who is not an expert in your specific space tries to tell you do something else, you're gonna be resistant. And that's not just physicians,
Yeah.
myself included. If someone who doesn't know anything about what I do, it becomes a problem. It's that mentality of when you're building these solutions, when you're building tools for clinical decision support, for assessing data to identify markers for different things, don't tell your physician what they should or should not do or what they can or cannot do. Build these systems to give them advice, to give the operator, the user, whether it's a physician or a nurse or a patient or whoever, here is information that leads you to make your decisions. So
Yeah.
instead of specifically saying, based on my numbers, this is the action you should take, more of based on the numbers, here's the information we are understanding, here is the synthesis of it. As an expert, as a clinician, make the decision for which way you're going to go. And so
Yeah.
that question of trust gets solved in that situation of the data show me this, but it's the human aspect in the loop that solves the actual problem.
Yeah, you're right. That's a very valid point in that I think the human in the loop is something that we hear now constantly. And we're not there where we are 100% trustworthy. I found out recently that I used Waymo, and I am told that Waymo is actually backed up by a lot of humans in the back end that kind of monitor issues that are going on with Waymo and sort of interact with it to like get them unstuck if they get stuck. So I'm like, oh, interesting. So there's human in the loop even in automated cars. Yeah, makes you feel safer, I guess, right?
But to the example you gave about the autonomous cars, I mean, with what we see on the news about Tesla, right? You have autopilot enabled, and you can look at all these statistics of autopilot being enabled for a vehicle like a Tesla will reduce the number of accidents that people are experiencing, right? It's
Mm.
reacting, it's stopping, it's moving, everything of sorts, and the accident incidence rate is significantly lower,
Yeah.
but it's not zero.
Yeah.
It doesn't get to zero. And the moment that there is an accident or the moment that an autopilot system misbehaves and crashes, maybe the cameras got flooded with sunlight or something of sort, we immediately freak out. We immediately say, well, it's broken. It's like,
Yeah.
it's right 99% of the time, but
Yeah.
that percent, it
Yeah.
didn't work. Whereas the human driver is right 80% of the time.
So we've talked about some of the challenges with, so let's kind of look at the bright side here and how disruptive and what do you see in the future crystal ball if you look at AI, especially in healthcare? What are some of the great things that can happen that you see that from your work recently, working with physicians and healthcare systems, where do you see some of the big wins?
I think the reality here is AI technology or AI tools are used in every single technical solution these days. I
Yeah.
think 99% are positioning themselves as AI companies. A lot of that makes sense, but some of it, of course, doesn't. But the reality is that we're starting to get to this space where we really can't differentiate sometimes what is AI and what's not AI. Technology itself is just simply evolving. It's
Yeah.
simply growing. It's simply becoming better, more useful, more integrated, more transparent in many situations. Healthcare is not any different in that regard. We are using machine learning or LLM technology or agentic technology in all aspects of healthcare. You're no stranger to the startup ecosystem, right? And a startup does not have a guarantee of success, and that's
Yeah.
okay. In healthcare specifically, I'll give you a couple of examples. Within the radiology space, that's probably the most direct example. Machine learning tools are using radiology scans, X-ray, CTs, MRIs, you name it, to automate detection of incidentals within the actual images. And it's able to highlight the different things that it's detecting. It's able to create write-ups of here's what we detect here, and here's this and this, and be able to provide that to the radiologists themselves. So is that eliminating the need of radiologists? No, but it's changing their workflow and it's changing what they're doing day to day. So instead of every radiologist starting at zero, starting at just a blank image, they're starting with an image with markup, with insights, with guidance. They're able to dig deeper on these things and be able to act on more images on a day to day basis and act with more information, more insights, really provide a better outcome, a clearer answer to what is actually going on in these spaces. That's probably the easiest and most direct example of that. And
Yeah.
I think just about every single healthcare system is either playing with that, testing it, piloting it, or have that in production.
There's a lot that can be done in that human readable X-rays versus machine reading X-rays. You can get a scale of detail and analysis that a human eye normally wouldn't see, right? So it's really exciting that there may be things that we can catch a lot earlier and a lot better with using AI. And the radiologist's job becomes more of a analyzing information coming out of these tools than just reading, pure reading of the image.
Yeah. I would say they're still analyzing, they're still reading, but they're reading with more additional information, with more insight available to them. Is one of the things that some of the more advanced tools in this space are doing is they're looking at the historical records as well. So it takes quite some time to really truly read an X-ray or to read an MRI. MRI is lots and lots of slices of an image, right?
Right.
It's not a singular 3D model that you're rotating around. We're not quite there yet, but it's slicing up the actual thing that you're trying to look at, which can take a while for a radiologist to read through all the different scans to understand what exactly they're trying to find and everything of sorts. And if that patient has had a history of MRIs, how much time does it take to go through and read that whole backlog to understand if there's a pattern, if there is a progression of something, right? So by using some of these automation tools, some of these processes, it's able to give you historical insight,
Yeah.
factored in with the current insight. And now you have a much clearer picture of what you're actually looking at right now.
Yeah. No, that's great. Any other area other than radiology that you see?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've tried to do for a long time in the past uh, was try to look at the prediction of disease incidence. So essentially, what is the likelihood that you as an individual are going to develop a certain condition or disease within the next time frame, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 5 years, whatever it might be, right? Can I use historical data or some amount of data to predict that you're going to have a certain condition within a certain amount of time?
Mm.
And the question is that feasible? Is that possible? Right. I'll give you a simple example. There is indication that if you're wearing a Fitbit, a simple step trackers, you have a certain cadence to your steps. You have a certain pattern to how many steps you take on a day to day basis. And suddenly you start to have a decline in your daily number of steps. Is that indicative of you experiencing certain clinical situations, perhaps an onset of diabetes? So, can you use behavioral data and lifestyle data to predict a disease like diabetes or pre-diabetic state? Now, is that enough? Probably not.
Yeah.
But if you factor in other things, other medical tests, other information from your background, other metrics that are coming in, can you use that to help predict?
Mm.
But if you had a large enough data set of lookalikes, people that are not 100% you, but similar to your socioeconomic status, similar to your geographic location, similar to your ethnic background and your genetic history, where your ancestors are from and everything of sorts, similar to your dietary situations. If there's enough data in that space, can we then predict what might happen to you in the next X number of days or months or years?
That is really very interesting and exciting. What is your leadership philosophy and how do you lead teams with whatever's going on in today's technology world, right? And then maybe also anything specific to healthcare.
Yeah. So think of it this way: in the quintessential technology world, the general moniker is fail fast, right? You try something, you fail at it, you change something up, you move on with a different approach. You can't always do that in healthcare. You
Yeah.
can't always do that in situations where the outcome of you failing could be detrimental to a person. That kind of sets a conflict against, you want to move fast and you want to innovate and you want to drive something big, but you
Mhm.
also have to be careful. And so you have to factor in the fail fast mentality with the clinical mentality of first do no harm. And so those two things are, I would argue, fundamental antonyms in some situations, but you have to find the balance point between them. And
Mm.
when I drive solutions, when I drive innovation, those are the two principles that I try to marry at all times. You
Mm.
want to move quickly and fail fast, but you also want to understand the do no harm mentality of it. And how do you do that? Well, the first thing is understand your purpose, understand your problem space, understand what you're trying to actually solve for, not just for the purpose of being shiny and something
Mm.
unique, but purposeful innovation, purposeful goals. You want to set your problem as your goal. You
Mm.
want to measure your steps that you're trying to achieve that goal. But every step of the way, the moment that you have a negative measurement, that's a good thing. That's a good thing that you have a negative measurement, because that tells you that you're not lying to yourself and you're able to revise and adjust your pathway. You don't
Mm.
have to wait until the actual failure to adjust your solution. But in order to do that, you also have to build a coalition. So when it comes to these kinds of environments, if you don't have a group of folks that are aligned with you on your goal, you're going to fail and you will not recover. When you're running a pure technology startup, it could be a team of one and you can accelerate and excel in this space. Dealing with high stakes like healthcare, you can't be by yourself. You have to have a coalition of experts in the space who know what they're doing, who know the ramifications of this, and can correct your course for you to help you with this. You have to be aligned. You can't be
Yeah.
forced into it. They have to be aligned as part of a coalition moving in the right direction.
One of the areas that's always interesting to me is behavioral health,
Mhm.
right? Do you think AI can help people be more aware or give them some tools on understanding themselves, right? A lot of the challenges comes from people not really understanding who they are and knowing that everybody is different, right? So the reason I ask that is leadership or leading people, you need to be able to understand because in the old days in India, for example, when we had something called Indian Sanskrit word called Gurukula, which basically means that there is a guru and then there are students that kind of follow him around basically. So he'll have, let's say, 6 or 8 people that are assigned to him, and his job is to shape them entirely in life, plus teach them whatever skills. And he would teach them based on what the student is ready for, right? What he is capable of learning at that point or understanding and their biases or whatever their nature is. So that's always something that I think a lot of the issues and problems today in mental health, I think, is not being able to understand yourself, right? Everybody says you didn't come with a owner's manual, right? So I'm just curious, I think, is that something that you think AI could help in?
I think that question is really underlying a different question, which is if you know something about yourself, are you more or less inclined to change that something? What is it that would cause you as a human to change a behavior, to change an action, or to change an element about yourself? Is having more information about your state going to do that? And the way I look at it is AI solutions, they're crunching numbers, they're looking at the data,
Mm-hmm.
right? They can assess, they can provide insights, they can provide guidance, they can provide recommendations, but ultimately, you as a human are the only one who can actually act on that information. So
Right.
if I'm experiencing some behavioral health issues and I get insight and I get a report that says, hey, you got this, this, and this. If I don't want to change, I'm not going to change, no matter how good that AI is.
The prerequisite is there needs to be willingness and openness for them to do that.
But I think you actually raised the key in that space, the guru. Why is it that those folks are not just assigned to the guru, but they're following and they're listening and they're acting on the guru's recommendations? It's because
Trust.
they trust the guru.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
believe in the guru. They are accepting of that guru's guidance. So if we are looking at an AI tool and saying, well, whatever it tells me I will do, I will follow. If we're accepting of that feedback and we trust and act on it like
Yeah.
we would trust the guru, then that could solve some problems. But I'm more inclined to say that you still have to have a human component to it that you would actually trust. Because I think the AI will give you insights, recommendations, but you need a human link, especially in the behavioral health space, to give you the human kind of advice on what to do next.
That is true. All right. My last question for you is about the next generation and the future innovators, healthcare or otherwise. So, what is your advice? It's really a crazy time for a lot of different reasons, right? So, as people come of age, how is AI and how is everything else that is going to impact them? And what would be your recommendation or what would be your guidance to them for the next few years, 2, 3 years?
Next few years,
Couple of
in
years.
12 months, the entire landscape will be different. So anyone who can tell you what's going to happen even 6 months from now is probably lying to you. But to
Right.
kind of compensate for that, right? I would say the key is get out there and talk to people. Don't just simply sit on your AI chat agents and talk to them all the time and just simply use those things, but get out there and make human connections. Get out there and talk to people that are experts in different spaces, different walks of life, different skill sets, and ask questions. The way that you can get ahead on
Yeah.
these things is to be inquisitive, to explore and learn, to open your mind to new ideas and new concepts, and use your critical thinking ability, build that critical thinking ability to understand what is right and wrong, and what is true and false, and what is the right direction. But build up your own ability to think critically, fundamentally about what it is that you're being told or what you're seeing or what you're hearing. Because part of the problem we're experiencing with a lot of the new Gen AI concepts is that images can be falsified, videos can be falsified, voice online can be falsified, news articles can be falsified. Anything can be falsified, but a human interaction can't be. Right?
Yeah.
When you and I talk every now and then, and when
Yeah.
we're standing in front of each other and talking, you can't fake that.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's building those connections, those relationships, getting that understanding, and using the information that you get to think critically about what it is that's right and true.
Yeah.
And as technology evolves, as AI evolves, as healthcare principles evolve, that skill set, that single pure skill set, is going to allow you to figure out what the right solution is in those spaces.
Yeah. Great point. Nick, it was a great pleasure having you on our podcast today. And thank you so much for your time. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Seth. I really had a great time being here.
Thank you.